BF was teasing my dad with his friends, so I told them that his sister borrowed money for IVF treatments and got divorced. Now his family wants to sue me for saying that. So I've been with my boyfriend for 3 years now, and we've been living together for 6 months. Everything's been going well until a few days ago, when we went out for dinner with some of his friends. Things took a turn when one of them started making fun of my dad. I got upset and blurted out something bad about his family in the heat of the moment. To give you some background, my dad, who is 58, retired a while ago. He's a bit eccentric and handed over the reins of his business to my older brother so he could spend more time at home. Since then, he's had a lot of free time on his hands. He asked me to help him set up a YouTube channel where he talks about current events and stuff. I did it for him and taught him how to make videos. Now he posts them regularly, even though he only has a few subscribers. It's just a fun hobby to keep him busy. When my boyfriend and his friends started making fun of my dad's YouTube channel, I didn't find it funny. My boyfriend even played one of my dad's videos on his phone, which made things worse. He was showing my dad's video to everyone at the table, and his friends were laughing hysterically. But I could sense that they weren't laughing because they found my dad funny. They were laughing at him, thinking it was ridiculous. I tried to discreetly tell my boyfriend that I was uncomfortable, but he brushed it off, telling me to relax and stop being so sensitive. I was really upset because it seemed like he cared more about impressing his friends than respecting my feelings. I also didn't appreciate him allowing his friends to mock my dad while I was right there, so I decided to bring up something about his family too. I mentioned how his sister had to get divorced because she was caught stealing money while working for her father-in-law. The whole table went quiet because nobody knew the real reason for his sister's divorce. Everyone thought it was just because of compatibility issues. She had only been married for a year after dating for 2, and 6 months into the marriage, she quit her job to work for her husband's family business instead. Later on, she got caught embezzling money. She explained that she did it because she needed the money for personal expenses, specifically for IVF treatment. She had been struggling to conceive, but her husband wasn't ready to dip into their savings for IVF yet, so she resorted to stealing money instead. It was a chaotic situation and she almost got arrested. However, to avoid negative attention, her husband decided to keep it quiet. They ended up firing her and getting divorced. Since then, my boyfriend's sister has been living with her parents and has been unemployed for almost a year. This was all kept secret because my boyfriend and his family were very selective about who they trusted. My boyfriend confided in me about it last year when it happened, so I was one of the few people who knew the truth, and I kept quiet about it. But when he started teasing my dad with his friends, I couldn't ignore it anymore, and I blurted out the truth without considering the consequences. After a few minutes of awkward silence, my boyfriend abruptly left the table, and I followed shortly after. Since we had driven to the restaurant in my car, I headed to the parking lot, but he was nowhere to be found. I waited for about 15 minutes, but he didn't show up, so I decided to drive home alone. He didn't return home that night, and despite my attempts to contact his friends and parents, I couldn't reach anyone. I felt remorseful for my impulsive outburst, but I also believed it wasn't fair for him to mock my dad and expect me to tolerate it. The next day, I stayed home from work, hoping for his return. He finally came back in the evening, wearing fresh clothes, indicating he hadn't spent the night aimlessly wandering. It was evident he had stayed at either his parents' place or with a friend. He ignored me and acted as though I didn't even exist while we were in the living room. When he came into the house, he ignored me and headed straight to the bedroom, locking himself in. I waited for him to come out, but when he didn't, I went to knock on the bedroom door. Despite my attempts, he didn't respond, even after I knocked for almost 5 minutes. Frustrated, I started banging on the door and demanded he come out. The room contained a lot of my belongings too, so I felt entitled to be there. Instead of opening the door, he yelled at me to leave him alone, claiming I had lost the right to speak to him after what happened the other day. This annoyed me even more because it felt like he was painting me as the only one at fault. I explained to him that I only brought up his sister's divorce because he was mocking my dad right in front of me and allowing his friends to join in, despite telling me not to intervene. He argued that his actions weren't meant to be insulting and suggested I was only upset because I was embarrassed by my father's online activities. I disagreed, as I had shown my dad's videos to many other people, including my friends. Even some of my coworkers found my dad's videos amusing, so the idea that I was embarrassed by his online presence, and that's why I reacted strongly, seemed invalid. However, he persisted, claiming he never intended to laugh at my dad's expense, and was shocked that I thought so poorly of him. He reminded me that I had shown him my dad's videos several times before, and he had always been supportive. He couldn't understand why I thought he would mock it now. I countered by explaining that it seemed like he was seeking validation from his friends by showing them and letting them laugh at my dad's videos. He became defensive, insisting that he didn't need his friends' laughter to feel validated. He then argued that even if I were correct in my assumptions, I had no right to bring up something as personal as his sister's divorce, just to get back at him, as it had been a difficult time for him and his family. He expressed feeling humiliated by my bringing up his family matter in front of his friends, seeing it as a mockery and a source of great embarrassment for him and his family. He believed that my reaction to his teasing of my dad was excessive and couldn't fathom why I would escalate matters to such an extent. We argued back and forth until he eventually opened the bedroom door and let me in. He was visibly upset, emphasizing that what I said was far worse than his actions, and that there was no comparison between the two. I acknowledged regret for my outburst, but insisted that he also needed to recognize the hurt caused by his mockery of my dad. However, instead of apologizing, he informed me that his parents were planning to take legal action against me for defamation, as I had discussed his sister's divorce among his friends. Initially, I thought he was joking, but he assured me he was serious. He spent the night at his parents' house after our argument, where he discussed the situation with them. They were upset and demanded an apology from me, not just to him and his family, but especially to his sister, and they wanted it in writing. Failure to comply would result in them pursuing legal action against me. He left the decision to apologize or face a lawsuit in my hands, and in a fit of anger, I demanded he leave and go live with his parents, comparing them to enablers just like his sister's situation. Our argument escalated into a bitter fight, with hurtful words exchanged about each other's families. Eventually, he packed his belongings and left. It's been a day since he left, and I'm unsure of what to do next. I doubt they have grounds for a lawsuit since I only discussed it with his friends, and it hasn't caused any real damage to his sister's reputation. I don't believe it's defamation if what I said is true, so I'm not worried about legal action. However, I'm conflicted about whether I should feel guilty for revealing the reason behind his sister's divorce. Update. I've concluded that I have nothing to apologize for and have decided to end things with my boyfriend for good. As for whether to refer to him as my boyfriend or ex, I'm still undecided. Whether I refer to him as my boyfriend or ex, it's the same person. He can't just mock my dad for laughs with his friends and expect me to be okay with it. That kind of behavior doesn't sit well with me, and I'm relieved he left before I had to ask him to. It's less hassle for me this way. Many of you have asked for my dad's channel name, and while I'd love to share it, revealing it would compromise my anonymity. I hope you stumble upon it someday, but I can't share it directly. I told my dad about the incident a few days ago. He seemed hurt because he liked my boyfriend, and they got along well. I hadn't planned to tell him, but he sensed something was wrong during lunch and pressed me until I confessed. He tried to brush it off, but I could tell it bothered him that my boyfriend had mocked him. I didn't mention bringing up his sister's divorce to hurt my boyfriend because I knew my dad wouldn't approve. He's passive and has taught me to avoid confrontation, so he wouldn't appreciate that I stooped to such a level, even if it was for his sake. I haven't heard from my ex yet, and there's been no sign of any lawsuit. I'm pretty sure it was just a scare tactic to make me apologize, which didn't work because I'm not afraid of them. I know he'll have to come back to collect his things, as there's still a lot left at my place. I just hope he does it soon so I can move on completely. This morning, he texted me saying he'd come by in the evening to pick up his stuff. It was the first text since our breakup, almost 2 weeks ago. All his friends and even his sister have blocked me on social media, as I expected. He's the only one who hasn't removed me yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did after today. We agreed he'd come at 7 o'clock, and I'd be home from work by then. I was a bundle of nerves when I got home from work, dreading the encounter. I've been avoiding anything to do with him since the breakup, but I still find myself missing him sometimes. To calm my nerves, I had a few glasses of wine before he arrived. I left the bottle out on the coffee table, which turned out to be a mistake. When he arrived and saw it, he gave me a strange look. I wanted to explain that my wine consumption wasn't because I missed him, but I kept quiet to avoid making things more awkward. We didn't exchange any words. He simply went to our room and packed silently. I sat on the couch, lost in my phone, unsure of what to do while he was there. After about 20 minutes, when he finished packing, he returned to the living room and said he was leaving. I couldn't find the right words, so I just nodded and returned to my phone. He asked if I had anything to say, sensing it might be our last meeting. I had a lot on my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to say it, fearing it would hurt him too much. Instead, I mentioned that I had also wished things could work out, but his disrespect towards my father during our last argument made it impossible for me to continue the relationship. He tried to defend himself, but I stopped him, knowing it would only lead to another argument. I wanted to end things on a good note, so I suggested arguing would be pointless. He didn't say much and left, saying he'd wait for my call if I changed my mind. Deep down, I knew I didn't love him as I used to, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. Insulting my father and threatening to sue me were just too much for me to overlook. I miss him, and part of me wishes we could reconcile, but some things are too difficult to forgive easily. I doubt I'll call him, even though it will be hard for both of us. I hope he moves on, as it might make things easier for us both. Update: it's been 3 weeks since he collected his things, and yesterday, I bumped into a friend of his at the mall. This guy was at the dinner party when the incident happened, and I half expected him to avoid me, especially since he had blocked me on social media. To my surprise, he approached me instead and initiated a conversation. I was taken aback by this unexpected gesture. He greeted me and mentioned wanting to discuss what happened at the party. I was puzzled because I didn't see what he could possibly have to talk about, considering they weren't directly involved. Nonetheless, I encouraged him to continue. I was genuinely surprised when he apologized for laughing at my dad's videos. It caught me off guard because even my ex hadn't apologized, despite being at fault. After a moment of processing, I accepted his apology and assured him I didn't hold it against him. While it would have been better if they hadn't laughed at my dad, I was more disappointed in my ex than in them. He expressed regret, acknowledging that their actions played a role in our breakup. I told him it was okay and expected the conversation to end there. However, he lingered, indicating he had more to say. I was curious because I couldn't fathom what else we had to discuss. He and I weren't friends. Our interactions were solely because of my ex. However, his demeanor hinted that whatever he had to say was significant. Reluctantly, I agreed to listen, and we headed to the nearest coffee shop. Once we had our coffee, he dove into a surprising revelation. He disclosed that after my ex left the restaurant on the day of our fight, he had been in constant communication with their group. My ex portrayed me as overreacting and fabricating stories about his family, particularly his sister's divorce. Most of their friends bought into his narrative and urged him to pressure me into a written apology. It wasn't just about him. They demanded apologies to his family and sister as well. To my shock, I learned my ex hadn't gone to his parents' house as he claimed. Instead, he went to a friend's birthday celebration, where they plotted against me. They concocted a plan to intimidate me into apologizing by threatening a defamation lawsuit. This friend confided that he didn't agree with the scheme and even warned my ex it would likely lead to our breakup. Furthermore, my ex had boasted to his friends about declaring his love for me during his visit to collect his belongings. He was confident I would call him back, citing the wine bottle on my coffee table as evidence of my longing for him. I was trying to appear strong, but inside, I was shaken by the revelations. My ex's friend recounted the elaborate lies my ex had spun post-breakup. He hadn't disclosed the real reason to his parents, and the threat of a lawsuit was just a manipulative ploy to force an apology. Learning this left me horrified and disillusioned. His friend felt compelled to disclose the truth, fearing I might consider reconciling. I appreciated his honesty amidst the deceit of his friend circle. Upon returning home, I blocked my ex on all social media platforms. He didn't deserve any access to my life. Though tempted to inform his parents of the truth, I decided against it to avoid further trouble. Reflecting on the situation, I regretted ever meeting him. He turned out to be toxic, and I wanted no part of him or his circle of friends, except for the one who had the integrity to reveal the truth. I hoped to never encounter him again, as the mere thought filled me with anger. Update. It's been almost a year since the breakup, and I wanted to share my experience. Here's a little update on how I've been doing. The first couple of months after our breakup were tough, and I struggled with trust issues. Naturally, I wasn't interested in dating, especially after a 3-year-long relationship that turned out to be one of my worst mistakes. Instead, I focused on self-improvement, which brought me a lot of happiness. I started therapy to process the breakup and work through my emotions instead of avoiding them, and it made a significant difference. About 4 months after the breakup, a friend informed me that my ex had already moved on to someone new. It was hard to accept, given the relatively short time since our split and the duration of our relationship. However, I realized I couldn't control his actions, so I made a conscious effort to stop hearing about him from my friends. They respected my wishes, and it allowed me to fully concentrate on myself. I'm unsure if he's still with the new girl or if they've broken up, as I haven't heard from him since he texted me about a month ago to inform me of his move to LA for work. I chose not to reply. Reflecting on my journey, I've realized how far I've come, and I'm proud of myself. It wasn't easy. There were some dark days when all I wanted to do was cry in bed, but I persevered, and now I'm living my best life. Looking back, I wouldn't change anything because I'm genuinely happy with how things have turned out. I want to thank you all for the love and kind messages. They've meant a lot to me.